I stood in my own doorway, holding a single suitcase, while my 28-year-old daughter Madison screamed at me like I was a stranger. Her face was twisted with something I had never seen before, pure greed mixed with rage. She clutched that lottery ticket in her trembling hand, waving it at me like a weapon. "You won't get a penny of my money, old witch." The words cut deeper than any knife ever could. This was my baby girl, the child I had sacrificed everything for. But as she demanded I leave my own home, I noticed something she had completely missed. Madison was so consumed with her fury that she never bothered to actually look at whose name was printed on that ticket. The foundation of this nightmare was built over years of quiet sacrifice that Madison never seemed to notice. After her father David passed away from lung cancer 5 years ago, we were left drowning in medical debt and funeral expenses. David had been the breadwinner, working construction while I stayed home to raise Madison. When he got sick, I watched our savings disappear into treatments that ultimately couldn't save him. Madison was 23 then, fresh out of high school, and uncertain about her future. I knew she needed direction, so I worked double shifts at Murphy's Diner on Main Street during the day and took a night cleaning job at the office complex downtown. Every morning I would drag myself home exhausted, my feet aching and my back screaming, but I kept pushing because Madison had decided she wanted to become a nurse. Nursing school wasn't cheap. Between tuition, textbooks, uniforms, and living expenses, it cost nearly $40,000 over 3 years. I picked up every extra shift I could find, worked holidays, skipped meals to save money, and sold almost everything of value we owned. My wedding ring went to a pawn shop to pay for her final semester. I told Madison it was being repaired. Throughout those 3 years, Madison would complain about our modest 2-bedroom house, the lack of cable television, and having to drive my 10-year-old Honda Civic instead of a newer car. She would sigh dramatically when I served simple meals like spaghetti and ground beef, rolling her eyes when I suggested we rent movies instead of going to the theater. Every sacrifice I made seemed to frustrate her more. When Madison finally graduated nursing school last year, I expected things to change. I thought she would get a good job, help with expenses, and maybe even show some gratitude for what I had done. Instead, she moved into an expensive apartment across town with 2 roommates, bought a brand new car with a loan I had to co-sign, and started living beyond her means. 6 months ago, Madison lost her apartment because she couldn't keep up with the rent and her car payments. She moved back into my house temporarily, or so she claimed. But instead of contributing to household expenses or helping with bills, Madison treated me like a hotel manager. She would leave dirty dishes in the sink, complain about the water pressure in the shower, and bring her boyfriend Travis over without asking. Travis was everything I had hoped Madison would avoid: unemployed, arrogant, and constantly encouraging Madison to demand more from life without working for it. He would sit at my kitchen table eating my food while telling Madison she deserved better than living with her old-fashioned mother. Every Tuesday morning for the past 4 years, I had maintained one small ritual that kept hope alive in my heart. I would take $20 from my tip money at the diner and buy a lottery ticket at Johnson's convenience store. It was my only indulgence, my tiny dream that maybe someday things would get easier. Last Tuesday had been no different, except for one small accident. I had bought the ticket as usual, tucked it into my purse, and headed home to grab lunch between my diner shift and cleaning job. While heating up leftover soup, I accidentally knocked over my coffee mug, spilling the contents across the kitchen counter. The lottery ticket got soaked. I carefully laid it flat on the counter to dry, planning to put it away safely once the coffee dried. That evening when I came home from cleaning offices, I was too exhausted to remember the ticket. Madison was out with Travis. The house was quiet, and I fell into bed without thinking about anything except getting enough sleep to do it all again the next day. Wednesday morning changed everything, though I wouldn't understand how dramatically until much later. Madison had gotten up early, which was unusual for her since she normally slept until noon on her days off. She was rummaging through the kitchen, looking for something to complain about, when she spotted the lottery ticket still lying on the counter. Madison had bought a few lottery tickets herself over the past year, usually when she was feeling particularly sorry for herself about our financial situation. Without examining the ticket closely, she assumed it was one of hers that she had forgotten about. She grabbed her phone and checked the winning numbers that had been drawn Tuesday night. I was getting ready for my morning shift at the diner when I heard Madison scream from the kitchen. Not a scream of pain or fear, but something else entirely. When I rushed downstairs, I found her dancing around the kitchen, clutching the lottery ticket and her phone. "I won!" she kept shouting. "I actually won!" She was so excited she could barely form complete sentences. $15 million! $15 million! Madison grabbed me by the shoulders, shaking me as if I might not understand. "Do you know what this means? I never have to work again. I can buy a mansion. I can travel the world." The transformation in Madison's attitude toward me was immediate and chilling. Within minutes of checking those numbers, she went from barely tolerating my presence to looking at me like I was an obstacle to her dreams. She started making phone calls, telling friends about her windfall, and began talking about claiming the prize as soon as possible. Madison never once examined whose name was actually printed on that ticket. She was so convinced it belonged to her, so consumed with visions of wealth and freedom, that she didn't bother with such trivial details. Her assumption was complete and absolute. But I knew exactly whose name was on that ticket, because I had filled it out myself last Tuesday morning, just as I had every Tuesday morning for 4 years. The confrontation that would haunt me for weeks began Thursday morning, when Madison announced her new plans for our future. She had spent the entire previous day on the phone with lottery officials, financial advisors, and real estate agents. The 24 hours since discovering the winning numbers had transformed my daughter into someone I barely recognized. Madison cornered me in the living room while I was getting ready for my diner shift. Her eyes held a coldness I had never seen before, not even during her most difficult teenage years. She had prepared a speech, and I could tell she had been rehearsing it. "We need to discuss your situation," she began, her voice taking on a tone of authority that made my blood run cold. "I've been thinking about this all night, and I've realized that this lottery win is exactly the fresh start I need. The fresh start I deserve after being held back for so many years." I sat down slowly, unsure where this conversation was heading, but sensing it wouldn't end well. Madison remained standing, looking down at me like a judge pronouncing sentence. "I've already contacted the Lottery Commission and scheduled my appointment to claim the prize for Friday morning," she continued. "I've also spoken with a financial advisor who specializes in lottery winners. He's helped me understand that I need to make some major life changes immediately to protect my new wealth." Madison pulled out a notebook where she had been making lists. "First, I'm buying a house in California, somewhere near Los Angeles, where I can network with successful people and leave all this poverty behind. Second, I'm quitting my nursing job effective immediately. And third, I'm ending all the toxic relationships that have been dragging me down." When she said toxic relationships, Madison looked directly at me. The implication was clear, but she wasn't finished explaining. "You've been a burden my whole life," Madison said, her voice growing stronger and more confident with each cruel word. "Always struggling, always worried about money, always making me feel guilty for wanting nice things. Do you know how embarrassing it was growing up in this tiny house, wearing secondhand clothes, having friends ask why we couldn't afford basic things that normal families have?" I opened my mouth to respond, to remind her of the sacrifices I had made, but Madison held up her hand to silence me. "I don't want to hear excuses anymore," she said firmly. "This money is my ticket to freedom from you, from this house, from this boring town, from the constant stress of never having enough. I'm 28 years old, and I've wasted enough years being dragged down by your limitations." Madison's words felt like physical blows. Each sentence revealed how deeply she resented me, how every sacrifice I had made was seen as weakness rather than love. But she wasn't finished destroying what remained of our relationship. "I've given this a lot of thought, and I've decided that the healthiest thing for both of us is a clean break," Madison announced. "You need to find somewhere else to live. I'm giving you until Sunday to pack your things and get out of my house." "Your house?" I whispered, finding my voice for the first time since this nightmare began. "My house," Madison repeated firmly. "I'm the lottery winner now. I have $15 million. That makes me the decision maker in this family. And I've decided that you'll be much happier, somewhere more appropriate for someone your age. Maybe a senior living facility where you can make friends with other elderly people and not feel so dependent on your successful daughter." The casual cruelty of suggesting I belonged in a nursing home while she lived in luxury was breathtaking. Madison had calculated this humiliation carefully, and she was enjoying every moment of my shock and pain. "But don't worry," she added with mock generosity. "I'm not heartless. Once I get my money situation sorted out and buy my new house, I'll send you a small monthly allowance. Nothing extravagant, of course, because I can't have people thinking I'm supporting freeloaders, but enough to keep you fed and housed somewhere far away from my new life." Madison folded up her notebook and smiled at me with satisfaction. "I know this seems harsh, but you'll thank me later. We both need this fresh start. I need to surround myself with successful, positive people who will help me grow my wealth and achieve my potential. And you need to learn how to be independent instead of always relying on others to take care of you." The irony of Madison accusing me of relying on others while she planned to live off lottery winnings was staggering, but pointing out contradictions to someone consumed with greed is pointless. Madison had rewritten our entire history in her mind to justify treating me like garbage. I went upstairs and packed a single suitcase with my essential belongings. I moved through my bedroom like a sleepwalker, folding the few decent clothes I owned, gathering my medications, and taking the one photograph of David I kept on my nightstand. Everything else could wait. I needed to leave before Madison decided to escalate her cruelty even further. When I came back downstairs with my suitcase, Madison was on the phone with Travis. I could hear her laughing as she described our conversation. "You should have seen her face," Madison was saying. "She looked like someone had told her Santa Claus wasn't real, but this is exactly what I needed to do. I can't build a new life while dragging dead weight around with me." Madison noticed me standing there with my suitcase and made no effort to lower her voice or show any shame about what I was hearing. "Hold on, Travis," she said into the phone. Then she looked at me with the same expression she might use for a door-to-door salesman who was overstaying his welcome. "I'm glad you're being reasonable about this," Madison said. "It shows that maybe you do understand what's best for both of us. Just remember, you have until Sunday. I want all your belongings out of my house by then." As I walked toward the front door, I heard Madison return to her phone conversation with renewed enthusiasm. "She's finally leaving," Madison told Travis. "This is going to be so much easier than I thought. And you know what the best part is? I haven't even looked at the ticket details yet. I just matched the numbers online. Tomorrow I'll go to the lottery office and make it official, and then we can start planning our new life in California." I stopped walking. Madison's words hit me like a lightning bolt of realization. She hadn't looked at the ticket details. She hadn't seen whose name was printed on the ticket she was planning to claim. I quietly opened the front door and stepped outside into the afternoon sunshine. Madison's voice continued drifting through the window as she made plans to spend money that didn't belong to her, to claim a prize she had no right to claim, and to build a future on a foundation of lies and assumptions. But for the first time in 3 days, I wasn't entirely consumed with heartbreak. Tucked away in my mind was a small piece of knowledge that Madison's greed and arrogance had blinded her to completely. Dorothy Henshaw had been my closest friend for over 15 years, ever since we worked together as teacher's aides at the elementary school before I took the diner job. When I showed up at her apartment complex Thursday evening with my suitcase and tears streaming down my face, Dorothy took one look at me and pulled me inside without asking a single question. Dorothy lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment in a building about 3 miles across town from my house. She had divorced her husband 10 years earlier and built a peaceful life for herself, working part-time at the public library and volunteering at the animal shelter. At 62, Dorothy had silver hair that she wore in a practical bob, laugh lines around her green eyes, and the kind of steady wisdom that comes from surviving life's disappointments with grace. "Sit down and tell me everything," Dorothy said, guiding me to her small kitchen table. She put on a pot of coffee and sat across from me while I explained what had happened with Madison. Dorothy listened without interrupting, her expression growing more horrified with each detail I shared. "That ungrateful little witch," Dorothy finally said when I finished talking. "After everything you sacrificed for that girl, this is how she treats you?" I could shake some sense into her myself. But as we talked late into the night, I found myself focusing less on Madison's cruelty and more on the complex emotions swirling in my heart. Yes, I was devastated by my daughter's behavior. But underneath the immediate pain was something deeper and more troubling, the realization that Madison's treatment of me wasn't entirely surprising. "I think I've been seeing signs of this for years," I admitted to Dorothy as we sat drinking coffee at midnight. The way she rolled her eyes when I worked extra shifts to pay for her school. How she never thanked me for anything I did. The way she complained about our house and our life without ever acknowledging that I was doing the best I could. Dorothy nodded thoughtfully. "Some people are so focused on what they don't have that they can't see what's been given to them," she said. "But that doesn't excuse the way she's treating you now." As exhausted as I was, sleep didn't come easily that first night away from my own home. I kept replaying memories of Madison's childhood, trying to understand where I had gone wrong. Had I been too permissive? Too giving? Had my constant sacrifices taught Madison that my needs didn't matter? I remembered Madison at age 7, crying because her friend Ashley got a bicycle for her birthday, while Madison only got books and art supplies. I had worked extra shifts for 3 weeks to surprise Madison with a bike the following month. Instead of gratitude, Madison had complained that her bike wasn't as nice as Ashley's. I remembered Madison at age 16, furious because I couldn't afford to send her on the school trip to Washington, D.C. I had sold my grandmother's jewelry to make that trip possible, but Madison spent the entire time calling to complain about the hotel accommodations and the bus ride. I remembered Madison at age 21, graduating from nursing school and accepting her diploma while I watched from the audience. During her speech that day, Madison had thanked her professors, her friends, and her classmates. She never mentioned me once, even though I was the only reason she had been able to attend college at all. Looking back with clear eyes, I could see that Madison had been building toward this moment for years. Every time I had enabled her selfishness instead of setting boundaries, I had contributed to creating the person who could so easily throw me away when something better came along. Friday morning, Dorothy had to work at the library, but she insisted I stay at her apartment and rest. "You've been through a trauma," she said firmly. "Take some time to process everything before you make any major decisions." But I couldn't sit still. After Dorothy left for work, I found myself walking the 6 blocks to Johnson's convenience store. The owner, Mr. Johnson, was a kind man in his 70s who had immigrated from Ireland 40 years earlier. He had always been friendly during my weekly lottery ticket visits, and I trusted him to help me with the questions that were nagging at me. "Raquel," Mr. Johnson said warmly when I entered the store, "I haven't seen you this week. Did you skip your usual Tuesday ticket?" "Actually, that's what I wanted to ask you about," I said carefully. "I bought my ticket Tuesday morning as usual, but I've been having some memory issues lately. I'm trying to remember exactly what time I was here, and whether I filled everything out correctly." Mr. Johnson looked concerned. "Memory issues can be frightening," he said kindly. "But I remember you coming in Tuesday morning around 8:30, same as always. You bought your ticket with exact change from your tip money, and you filled it out right here at the counter. And I definitely wrote my name on it?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Of course you did," Mr. Johnson confirmed. "You always fill out your tickets the same way, your full name, your address, and you always use the same numbers. Family birthdays and anniversaries, if I remember right." Mr. Johnson paused for a moment, studying my face. "Is everything all right, Raquel? You seem worried about something." I took a deep breath and decided to trust him with part of the truth. "Someone in my family found my lottery ticket and thinks it might be worth something," I said. I just wanted to make sure I remembered the details correctly in case there are any questions. Mr. Johnson's eyes lit up with excitement. You mean you might have won something? That would be wonderful. Let me check Tuesday's drawing for you. He pulled out a newspaper and found the lottery section. The winning numbers Tuesday night were 4, 17, 23, 31, 42, and the Powerball was 9, he read aloud. I felt my knees go weak. Those were indeed my numbers. David's birthday, Madison's birthday, our wedding anniversary, the date Madison graduated nursing school, the date David died, and the number of years David and I were married. Those numbers match exactly, I whispered. Mr. Johnson looked at me in amazement. Raquel, do you realize what this means? Tuesday's jackpot was $15 million. If you have the winning ticket, you're a millionaire. But what if someone tried to claim a ticket that didn't belong to them? I asked carefully. Hypothetically speaking. Mr. Johnson's expression grew serious. That would be fraud, he said firmly. Lottery tickets are legal documents. Trying to claim someone else's winning ticket is a felony that can result in prison time. The Lottery Commission takes these things very seriously. He walked over to the security camera mounted above the counter. We keep footage for 30 days in case there are any disputes, he explained. If someone questioned whether you bought a particular ticket, this footage would prove it. I can see you right there on Tuesday morning, purchasing your ticket at 8:37 a.m. and paying with cash. Mr. Johnson looked at me with growing concern. Raquel, if someone is trying to claim your ticket, you need to contact the Lottery Commission immediately. This isn't just about money. It's about preventing someone from committing a serious crime. I thanked Mr. Johnson and left the store with my mind spinning. Everything he had told me confirmed what I already knew, but hearing it from an objective source made the situation feel more real and more urgent. When I returned to Dorothy's apartment, I sat at her kitchen table and tried to process everything I had learned. Madison was planning to commit fraud by claiming a ticket that didn't belong to her. She was so convinced of her entitlement to anything good in our lives that she hadn't even bothered to verify her right to claim the prize. Part of me wanted to call Madison immediately and confront her with the truth. But a larger part of me recognized that this situation was bigger than just a lottery ticket. This was about years of enabling Madison's selfishness, years of accepting disrespect and ingratitude, years of teaching my daughter that my needs didn't matter. For the first time in my life, I was going to let Madison face the consequences of her assumptions and her actions without rushing in to save her from herself. Dorothy returned from the library Friday afternoon to find me sitting at her kitchen table with papers spread out in front of me. I had spent the day making phone calls and researching my options, and I was finally beginning to feel like myself again instead of a victim of my daughter's cruelty. You look different, Dorothy observed as she hung up her sweater. More like the strong woman I've known for 15 years. I called Patricia Miller, I told Dorothy. Patricia was a lawyer friend who had helped me navigate David's medical bills and estate planning after he died. She's agreed to meet with me Monday morning to discuss my legal options. Dorothy sat down across from me, her eyes bright with curiosity. Legal options for what? I explained everything I had learned from Mr. Johnson about the ticket, the security footage, and the serious legal consequences of lottery fraud. Dorothy listened with growing amazement and satisfaction. So Madison is planning to commit a felony, Dorothy said when I finished. And she's too greedy and arrogant to realize it. That's exactly right, I confirmed. Patricia says that attempting to claim someone else's winning ticket is serious fraud, and since it's a federal lottery, it could involve federal charges. She also thinks I might have grounds for emotional distress damages based on how Madison has treated me. But even as we discussed the legal implications, I found myself struggling with conflicting emotions. This was still my daughter, despite everything she had done. The idea of Madison facing criminal charges felt both satisfying and heartbreaking. I don't want to destroy her life, I admitted to Dorothy. I just want her to understand that actions have consequences. Dorothy reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for our children is refuse to enable their destructive behavior, she said gently. Saturday evening, Dorothy's phone rang with news that made both of us realize how far Madison's delusions had progressed. The caller was Janet Murphy, the owner of Murphy's Diner where I worked. Janet had known Madison since she was a child, and she was calling because she was genuinely concerned about my well-being. "Raquel, I hope you don't mind me calling," Janet said when Dorothy handed me the phone. "But Madison came into the diner this afternoon, and I think you should know about the scene she caused." My stomach clenched with dread. "What kind of scene?" "Madison waltzed in around 2 o'clock wearing expensive new clothes that still had tags on them," Janet explained. "She was acting like she owned the place, interrupting customers and demanding to speak with me immediately. When I came out of the kitchen, she announced to the entire restaurant that you had won the lottery and wouldn't be needing your job anymore." I closed my eyes, imagining the embarrassment and confusion this must have caused. "But that wasn't the worst part," Janet continued. "Madison told everyone that you had been struggling financially for years because you were irresponsible with money, and that she was going to be generous enough to give you a small allowance to keep you quiet about family business." The cruelty of Madison's public humiliation was stunning. Not only was she planning to steal my lottery winnings, but she was destroying my reputation and relationships in the process. She told everyone that you would be moving to a senior facility where you could get proper care and stop being a burden on your successful daughter, Janet said, her voice thick with disgust. "Raquel, I've watched you work double shifts for years to support that girl. The way she talked about you made my blood boil." Janet paused before continuing. "I told Madison that you were a valued employee and a good friend, and that her behavior was completely inappropriate." She laughed and said I obviously didn't understand what it was like to finally have enough money to make necessary changes in your life. After I hung up the phone, Dorothy and I sat in stunned silence. Madison's behavior was escalating beyond anything I had imagined possible. She wasn't just planning to steal my lottery ticket. She was systematically destroying my relationships and reputation as part of her plan to erase me from her life. "She's burning every bridge," Dorothy said quietly. "She's so convinced that money will solve all her problems that she's willing to destroy anyone who might complicate her fantasy." That evening, I received a text message from Madison that confirmed Dorothy's observation. "Talk to your boss today," the message read. "She understands the situation now. You don't need to worry about working anymore. I'm handling everything. Your appointment with social services is Tuesday to discuss senior housing options. This is all for the best." I showed the message to Dorothy, who read it twice before shaking her head in disbelief. "Social services?" Dorothy said. "She's actually trying to have you declared incompetent or dependent, so she can control every aspect of your life." The realization that Madison was building a comprehensive plan to warehouse me while she enjoyed my lottery winnings was chilling. But it also strengthened my resolve to see this situation through to its conclusion without intervening to save Madison from herself. Sunday morning brought more evidence of Madison's increasingly reckless behavior. Dorothy's neighbor, Mrs. Chen, knocked on our door with a concerned expression and a story that demonstrated just how far Madison's spending spree had progressed. "I hope I'm not overstepping," Mrs. Chen said apologetically, "but I thought you should know that your daughter has been posting pictures all over social media about winning the lottery." Mrs. Chen showed us Madison's Facebook page on her phone. The posts from the past 4 days told a story of escalating delusion and financial irresponsibility. Thursday's post showed Madison wearing expensive designer clothes with the caption, "Finally getting the life I deserve. Sometimes dreams really do come true." Friday's post featured pictures of jewelry and handbags with the message, "Shopping spree day. When you win $15 million, you need to dress the part." Saturday's posts showed Madison and Travis at expensive restaurants and clubs with captions like, "Living my best life," and "Money changes everything." But the most disturbing post was from Sunday morning. Madison had shared a photo of a mansion in Beverly Hills with the caption, "My new home, closing next month." Finally escaping small-town poverty and toxic family drama. Mrs. Chen looked at me with genuine concern. "The comments on these posts are getting a lot of attention," she said carefully. People are asking questions about when and where she won, and some folks are saying the timeline doesn't match up with any recent lottery drawings in our state. I thanked Mrs. Chen for her concern and assured her that the situation would resolve itself soon. But after she left, Dorothy and I realized that Madison's public claims about lottery winnings were creating a permanent record of her intent to commit fraud. She's building the prosecution's case for them, Dorothy observed. Every social media post is evidence that she planned to claim money she knew wasn't rightfully hers. Monday morning couldn't come fast enough. I was ready to meet with Patricia and take whatever legal steps were necessary to protect myself and ensure that Madison faced the consequences of her choices. But I was also dreading the confrontation that was now inevitable. Madison had scheduled her lottery claim appointment for Friday morning. In less than 5 days, her world was going to collapse around her, and there would be no going back from the damage she had done to our relationship and to her own future. For the first time in years, I was going to let my daughter learn a hard lesson without rushing in to cushion the blow. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching the somber mood that had settled over me during the week. Patricia Miller had spent Monday and Tuesday helping me understand my legal rights and preparing for what was likely to happen at the lottery office. We had decided that the best approach was for me to be present when Madison attempted to claim the ticket, both to prevent the fraud from being completed and to have witnesses to her actions. Patricia, Dorothy, and I arrived at the State Lottery Commission building at 8:30 in the morning, 90 minutes before Madison's scheduled appointment. Patricia had contacted the lottery officials earlier in the week to alert them about the potential fraud attempt, and they had agreed to cooperate with documenting everything that happened. The lottery office was located in a nondescript government building downtown, with gray carpeting and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Patricia introduced me to James Crawford, the lottery security director, who explained how they planned to handle Madison's claim attempt. When someone presents a winning ticket, we verify their identity and cross-reference it with the name on the ticket, Mr. Crawford explained. If there's a discrepancy, we're required to investigate before processing any claim. We'll document everything that happens today for potential use in fraud prosecution. At 9:45, Madison and Travis arrived at the lottery office. Through the glass doors of the conference room where Patricia and I were waiting, I could see my daughter clearly for the first time since she had thrown me out of my own home 6 days earlier. Madison looked like a different person. She was wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than I made in 2 months, along with matching shoes and a handbag. Her hair had been professionally styled, and she was wearing makeup and jewelry that gave her the appearance of someone who had been wealthy for years rather than days. Travis was also dressed expensively, though he looked uncomfortable in his new clothes. He kept adjusting his tie and looking around nervously, as if he expected someone to challenge their right to be there. Both Madison and Travis were carrying themselves with an arrogance that was painful to watch. Madison walked up to the reception desk like she owned the building, and I could hear her voice through the glass as she announced her appointment with obvious pride and satisfaction. "Madison Martinez," she told the receptionist loudly enough for everyone in the waiting area to hear. "I'm here to claim my $15 million prize." The receptionist directed Madison and Travis to a claims processing office down the hall. Patricia and I followed at a distance, along with Mr. Crawford and another lottery official who would serve as a witness. Inside the claims office, Madison and Travis sat across from Mrs. Helen Rodriguez, the claims processing supervisor. Mrs. Rodriguez was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and a professional demeanor that betrayed no emotion as Madison handed over the lottery ticket with a flourish. "This is the moment I've been waiting for my entire life," Madison announced dramatically. $15 million. I still can't believe it's real. Mrs. Rodriguez examined the ticket carefully, checking the numbers against her computer records. "The numbers do match Wednesday's drawing," she confirmed. "This is indeed a winning ticket for $15 million. Madison let out a squeal of excitement and grabbed Travis's hand. "It's official! We're millionaires!" But Mrs. Rodriguez wasn't finished with her verification process. "I'll need to see some identification to confirm your identity," she said, maintaining her professional tone. Madison handed over her driver's license with confidence. Mrs. Rodriguez examined the license, then looked at the lottery ticket again, then back at the license. She repeated this process 3 times before excusing herself to consult with her supervisor. "Is there a problem?" Madison asked, her excitement beginning to mix with annoyance. "The numbers match, don't they?" "The numbers do match," Mrs. Rodriguez confirmed. "But there's a discrepancy in the documentation that needs to be investigated before we can process your claim." Madison's expression shifted from confusion to irritation. "What kind of discrepancy?" "The ticket is right there, and my ID is right there. What else do you need?" Mrs. Rodriguez left the office to speak with her supervisor, leaving Madison and Travis alone. Through the observation window, I could see Madison's confidence beginning to crack as she realized that something was going wrong with her carefully planned moment of triumph. When Mrs. Rodriguez returned 5 minutes later, she was accompanied by Mr. Crawford and 2 other lottery officials. The small office suddenly felt crowded and official in a way that clearly made both Madison and Travis uncomfortable. "Miss Martinez," Mrs. Rodriguez began carefully, "I need to inform you that the name on this lottery ticket does not match the name on your identification." Madison stared at her blankly for a moment, as if the words didn't make sense. "What do you mean the names don't match?" Mrs. Rodriguez turned the ticket around and pointed to the signature line. "The name on this ticket is Raquel Martinez, not Madison Martinez. According to lottery regulations, only the person whose name appears on the ticket can claim the prize." The color drained from Madison's face as she grabbed the ticket and stared at it for the first time since she had found it on my kitchen counter 6 days earlier. I watched through the window as the truth hit her like a physical blow. "This can't be right," Madison whispered, her voice shaking. "This is my ticket. I found it in my house. It has to be mine." Mr. Crawford stepped forward with a serious expression. "Miss Martinez, attempting to claim a lottery prize with a ticket that doesn't belong to you constitutes fraud. This is a felony offense that carries serious criminal penalties." Madison looked up from the ticket with wild eyes. "No, no, no," she said, her voice rising to near hysteria. "You don't understand. This ticket was in my house. My mother must have filled it out wrong. She's old, she gets confused. She probably didn't remember buying it. The Lottery Commission takes ticket ownership very seriously," Mr. Crawford explained patiently. "We've already verified that this ticket was purchased by Raquel Martinez at Johnson's convenience store last Tuesday morning. We have security footage and witness testimony confirming the purchase." Madison stood up so quickly that her chair fell backward. "I want to call my mother," she demanded. "She'll explain this. She'll tell you that we share everything. That what's mine is hers and what's hers is mine." Travis, who had been silent throughout this exchange, finally found his voice. "Madison, maybe we should just go," he said nervously. "This doesn't look good." But Madison was beyond reasoning. "No," she shouted. "I'm not leaving without my money. I've already quit my job. I've already bought things. I've already made plans. This money is mine." Mrs. Rodriguez maintained her calm professional demeanor. "Miss Martinez, I understand this is upsetting, but the law is very clear. You cannot claim a prize with a ticket that doesn't belong to you. If you continue to insist that this ticket is yours despite the evidence, we'll have no choice but to contact law enforcement." Madison's face twisted with rage and desperation. "Fine," she screamed. "Call my mother. She's Raquel Martinez. She'll come here right now and sign the ticket over to me. She'll do whatever I tell her to do." That was the moment when Patricia and I entered the claims office. Madison's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, hope, calculation, and finally desperate pleading, as she realized that her last chance for salvaging this situation was standing right in front of her. "Mom!" Madison cried, rushing toward me with tears streaming down her face. "Thank God you're here. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. These people think this lottery ticket belongs to you instead of me. But you can explain that we're family, that we share everything, that you want me to have the money." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, for the first time since this nightmare began. Madison's expensive clothes and makeup couldn't hide the desperation and panic in her eyes. This was the little girl I had raised, the young woman I had sacrificed everything for, and she was falling apart because her assumptions about entitlement and ownership had finally collided with reality. But I also saw something else in Madison's face that I had been seeing for years without acknowledging it. The absolute certainty that I would bail her out of any trouble she created, that I would sacrifice myself to give her whatever she wanted, that my role in her life was to solve her problems, regardless of the cost to myself. For the first time in Madison's 28 years, I was not going to rescue her from the consequences of her own choices. The silence in the lottery office stretched for what felt like an eternity as Madison waited for me to save her from the situation she had created. Her tear-stained face was filled with the desperate hope of someone who had never been denied anything by her mother, who couldn't imagine that this time might be different. "Mom, please," Madison whispered, reaching for my hands. "Just tell them that you want me to have the money. Tell them that you filled out the ticket for me, or that we bought it together, or something. You know I deserve this more than you do. You know I can do more with this money than you ever could." Even in her moment of complete desperation, Madison couldn't stop herself from expressing the entitlement that had brought her to this point. She genuinely believed that her wants mattered more than legal ownership, more than the truth, more than basic honesty. I gently pulled my hands away from hers and looked directly into her eyes. "Madison, this is my lottery ticket. I bought it with my own money last Tuesday morning, just like I've bought a ticket every Tuesday morning for the past 4 years. Your name isn't on it because you didn't buy it." Madison's face went white as she realized that I wasn't going to lie for her. "But you can sign it over to me," she said frantically. "You can transfer ownership. People do that all the time." "I could do that," I agreed quietly, "but I'm not going to." The words hit Madison like a slap across the face. For a moment, she just stared at me in complete shock, as if I had spoken in a foreign language. "What do you mean you're not going to?" Madison asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I mean that this is my lottery ticket, bought with my money, and I'm going to claim my prize," I said clearly. "You have no legal right to this money, and you never did." Madison turned to look at Travis, then at the lottery officials, then back at me, searching for someone who might support her version of reality. But the truth was unavoidable now, documented and witnessed, and impossible to deny. "You can't do this to me," Madison said, her voice beginning to rise again. "I've already spent money. I've already quit my job. I've already told everyone I won. You can't just take it back." Mr. Crawford stepped forward diplomatically. "Miss Martinez, your mother hasn't taken anything from you. This ticket never belonged to you in the first place." Madison whirled around to face him with fury blazing in her eyes. "She's my mother," she screamed. "Mothers are supposed to take care of their children. They're supposed to want what's best for them. What kind of horrible person keeps money from their own daughter?" The irony of Madison asking what kind of person would be cruel to family members was apparently lost on her completely. She had spent the past week demonstrating exactly that kind of cruelty. But her selfishness was so complete that she couldn't see the contradiction. "Madison," I said softly, trying to reach whatever part of my daughter might still be capable of reason. "6 days ago, you threw me out of my own home because you thought you had won money. You told me I was a burden, that I was toxic, that you wanted me out of your life forever. You humiliated me in public and tried to have me declared incompetent so you could control my life." Madison's tears started flowing again, but now they seemed motivated more by self-pity than genuine remorse. "I was excited," she sobbed. "I wasn't thinking clearly. I said things I didn't mean. But you're my mother. You're supposed to forgive me." "I do forgive you," I said, "and I meant it. But forgiving you doesn't mean enabling you to continue making destructive choices. It doesn't mean pretending that your behavior was acceptable, and it certainly doesn't mean giving you money that you tried to steal from me." Travis, who had been growing increasingly nervous throughout this confrontation, finally decided he had heard enough. "Madison, we need to leave," he said urgently. "This is getting worse every minute." But Madison wasn't ready to give up. "No," she shouted at Travis. "Don't you understand? This is $15 million. This is our future. This is everything we've been dreaming about. Travis looked around the room at the lottery officials, at Patricia with her legal briefcase, at the security cameras recording everything, and apparently decided that his dreams didn't include potential criminal charges. "I'm leaving, Madison," Travis said firmly. "You can come with me or you can stay here and make this worse. But I'm not going to jail over your family problems." Madison watched in horror as Travis walked out of the lottery office without looking back. In the span of 10 minutes, she had lost her boyfriend, her lottery windfall, and her last hope of maintaining the fantasy life she had been building for the past week. The lottery officials were clearly uncomfortable with the family drama playing out in their office, but Mr. Crawford needed to address the legal implications of what had just happened. "Miss Martinez," he said to Madison, "you attempted to claim a prize that didn't belong to you. While we understand that you may have been confused about ownership, the attempt itself constitutes fraud. We're required to report this incident to law enforcement for investigation." Madison turned to me with one final desperate plea. "Mom, please don't let them arrest me. Tell them it was all a misunderstanding. Tell them I thought the ticket was mine. You can stop this from happening." I looked at my daughter and felt my heart breaking for her, but not in the way she expected. I was heartbroken because I finally understood that years of rescuing Madison from the consequences of her choices had taught her that actions don't have consequences, that other people exist to solve her problems, and that she was entitled to whatever she wanted, regardless of how she treated people. "Madison, I love you," I said quietly. "But I can't protect you from this situation, because you created it yourself. You made assumptions, you made plans based on those assumptions, and now you have to face the reality that your assumptions were wrong." Madison stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her cycling through disbelief, rage, and finally a kind of desperate calculation. "Fine," she said, her voice turning cold and bitter. "Keep your money. But don't expect me to forgive you for this. Don't expect me to be part of your life anymore. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine." Madison gathered what remained of her dignity and walked toward the door of the lottery office. But before leaving, she turned back for one final attack. "I hope you're happy," she said with venom in her voice. "I hope $15 million is worth losing your only daughter forever. I hope you enjoy spending it all by yourself, because you're going to die alone and miserable, just like you deserve." After Madison left, the lottery office fell silent, except for the humming of fluorescent lights and the quiet clicking of Mrs. Rodriguez's computer keyboard as she prepared the proper claim forms for me to sign. But even as I prepared to claim my prize, I wasn't thinking about money. I was thinking about the daughter I had raised, the choices I had made as a parent, and the long road that had led us to this painful moment of truth. 3 months after that devastating confrontation at the lottery office, I was sitting in the sunroom of my new house, watching spring flowers bloom in the garden I had planted myself. The house wasn't a mansion like the one Madison had planned to buy in California, but it was mine, and it was perfect for a woman starting over at 65. Claiming my $15 million prize had been surprisingly straightforward once Madison was no longer trying to interfere with the process. After taxes, I received about $9 million, which was more money than I had ever imagined having. But the real prize wasn't the money itself. It was the opportunity to rebuild my life on my own terms. The first thing I did with my winnings was pay off every debt I owed, including the medical bills from David's cancer treatment that I had been carrying for 5 years. Then I quit both of my exhausting jobs and bought a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood with mature trees and friendly neighbors. But the most important thing I did was establish a trust fund for Madison. Not because she deserved it after her behavior, but because she was still my daughter, and I wanted her to have the chance to learn and grow from her mistakes. The trust was carefully structured with Patricia's help to provide for Madison's basic needs while requiring her to demonstrate genuine change before accessing any significant money. Madison could receive funds for housing, food, medical care, and education, but only if she was actively working, attending therapy, and making efforts to repair the relationships she had damaged. For the first month after the lottery office incident, Madison disappeared completely. She wouldn't answer my phone calls, wouldn't respond to my letters, and seemed determined to prove that she could survive without any help from me. During that time, I learned from Dorothy that Madison had lost her nursing job due to her unexplained absence after claiming to be a lottery winner. She had also defaulted on her credit card payments for all the expensive items she had bought during her week of assumed wealth. I worried about Madison constantly during those early weeks, but I resisted the urge to track her down and try to fix her problems. Patricia had helped me understand that my pattern of rescuing Madison from consequences had been a form of enabling that ultimately hurt both of us. If Madison was going to learn to be responsible for her own life, she needed to experience what happened when poor choices led to real difficulties. In late February, Madison called me for the first time since the lottery office. Her voice was small and tired, completely different from the confident, entitled tone she had used during her week as a supposed millionaire. "Mom," she said quietly, "I think I need help." Madison explained that she had been staying with friends, working temporary jobs to pay rent, and struggling to rebuild her life after the financial and professional damage she had done to herself. She had also been seeing a therapist, Dr. Sarah Williams, who had helped her begin to understand the patterns of entitlement and resentment that had poisoned our relationship. "Dr. Williams says I've been carrying around a lot of anger about Dad's death and our money problems," Madison told me during that first tentative conversation. "She says I blamed you for things that weren't your fault, and that I never learned how to be grateful for what I had because I was always focused on what I didn't have." Over the following weeks, Madison and I began having careful, supervised conversations with Dr. Williams's guidance. It was painful for both of us to examine the years of dysfunction in our relationship, but it was also necessary for any hope of healing. Madison had to confront the reality that her assumptions about the lottery ticket had been completely wrong, and that her treatment of me had been cruel and inexcusable. But I had to confront my own role in creating a daughter who felt entitled to take whatever she wanted without considering other people's rights or feelings. "I think I enabled your worst impulses because I was afraid of losing you," I admitted during one of our therapy sessions. "Every time you were upset or disappointed, I tried to fix it for you instead of teaching you how to cope with difficulty. I thought I was showing love, but I was actually preventing you from developing resilience and character." Madison nodded through her tears. "And I thought love meant never having to work for anything or be grateful for anything," she said. "I thought you owed me whatever I wanted just because you were my mother." The healing process was slow and sometimes discouraging. There were setbacks when Madison would revert to old patterns of blame and entitlement, and moments when I would slip back into wanting to rescue her from discomfort. But gradually, we both learned new ways of relating to each other. Madison found a new nursing job at a different hospital and began making regular payments on her debts. She moved into a small apartment that she could afford on her salary and started building a life based on her own efforts rather than other people's sacrifices. Most importantly, she began acknowledging and appreciating the things that had been given to her over the years. By late spring, Madison had qualified for her first disbursement from the trust fund, to enough money to pay off her remaining credit card debt and establish a small emergency savings account. But instead of spending it immediately, she asked to meet with me to discuss how the money should be used. "I want to pay you back for nursing school," Madison said during our meeting at a coffee shop near my new house. "I know the trust money technically comes from your lottery winnings anyway, but I want to formally acknowledge the debt I owe you for my education." I was touched by Madison's gesture, but I had a different idea. What if we use that money to establish a scholarship fund for other single mothers who want to help their children get an education? I suggested. "We could call it the David Martinez Memorial Scholarship, in honor of your father." Madison's eyes filled with tears, but they were different from the desperate, self-pitying tears she had cried in the lottery office. These were tears of recognition and gratitude. "I think Dad would like that," she said softly. "And I think it would help me remember what real generosity looks like." As I sat in my sunroom on this beautiful spring morning, reflecting on the past few months, I realized that the lottery ticket had given me something much more valuable than money. It had given me the opportunity to break the destructive patterns that had defined my relationship with Madison for years, and to discover what both of us were capable of when we stopped enabling each other's worst tendencies. Madison still had a long way to go in her journey toward becoming a fully responsible, grateful adult. But for the first time since she was a child, I had hoped that she would get there. And for the first time in my adult life, I was building a life that belonged entirely to me, funded by my own good fortune and guided by my own values. The lottery money had bought me a house and financial security, but the real prize was learning that love doesn't mean protecting people from the consequences of their choices. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is step back and allow the people we care about to grow into the best versions of themselves, even when that growth requires facing difficult truths. I had spent so many years believing that my job as a mother was to sacrifice everything for Madison's happiness. But I had learned that true happiness can't be built on other people's sacrifices. It can only be built on personal responsibility, genuine gratitude, and the deep satisfaction that comes from earning the good things in your life. As I finished my morning coffee and prepared to tend my garden, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete peace with my choices and genuine excitement about my future. At 65, I was finally living the life I had always deserved, surrounded by beauty I had created and relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The lottery ticket had changed everything, but not in the way Madison had imagined when she first found it on my kitchen counter. It had taught us both that the most valuable things in life, integrity, resilience, authentic love, can't be bought with any amount of money. They have to be earned through the sometimes painful process of becoming people worthy of them. What would you do if someone close to you tried to take credit for your success or good fortune? Have you ever had to choose between enabling a loved one's destructive behavior and allowing them to face the consequences of their actions? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider giving it a like and subscribing for more real-life stories about family, forgiveness, and finding strength in difficult situations. And if you think someone in your life could benefit from hearing Madison's and my journey, please share this story with them. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story, and I hope it reminds you that it's never too late to change destructive patterns and build the life you truly deserve. May you find the courage to love people enough to let them grow, even when that growth requires difficult lessons.